Let's get to know what the New York Giants are getting in sixth-round draft pick Darius Muasau, linebacker. And who better to tell us than our very own Locked On UCLA host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. That's coming your way next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for Giants Country on SI.com's Fan Nation. You can find our written work over at SI.com/NFL/Giants. And welcome on into my everydayers, my Blue Crew community members, my newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And on today's podcast, we are continuing our in-depth look at the New York Giants rookie class, the draft picks. We are up to sixth-round pick Darius Muasau. And here to join us to talk about Darius is the host of Locked On UCLA. He is Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Zach, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate you coming on. And Zach, let's start off by getting an overview as to what the Giants are getting in Darius Muasau.
I mean, I don't want to start off spitting cliches, but this is a great value pick in the sixth round to get somebody on the defense you're trying to improve. A very durable guy. It has a knack for being in the right place at the right time, and just tends to make a lot of plays at multiple stops from Hawaii to UCLA. A good defender, can make plays, force fumbles. He's generally in the right spot at the right time.
You know, there's been some talk that he can also be a special teamer. Have you seen that from him?
For him, UCLA had in the last couple of years with Chip Kelly, their special teams units were kind of interesting, but for him, mostly defensively, he was a big stalwart. But to transition him more into a full-time special teamer with the amount of tackles he made defensively, this is somebody who would, I think, easily transition into an NFL special teamer without a doubt.
Okay, so let's talk then more about his role in the defense. Now, I believe he's an inside linebacker. Is that correct? Off-ball linebacker. Where is his strength right now in terms of his game?
His strength is just making sure to stuff the run and making as many tackles. Last few years, he's been the leading tackler for UCLA. Even at Hawaii, he was the leading tackler there. So when it came to making stops, reading the plays, the Bruins last year had a great defensive line, and you saw Darius Muasau's numbers rise because of the D-line. So he's able to make plays, change things up, and able to find ways to stop the run and sometimes get an interception and force a fumble as well.
So is he mainly a two-down linebacker, or is he an every downer?
Every downer. You'll see him just about every time.
How is he in coverage?
He's been all right. I remember looking at drafts, trying to see where he would go, looking at where the Bruins would go NFL draft-wise. In space, with a lot of space, the Bruins were a little vulnerable when it came to pass coverage in the last couple of years. Muasau as a linebacker maybe has to grow in that spot. Standing, maybe I believe I saw is 5'11" in all the drafts and what he was officially listed as. But maybe in short coverage, slant pass game, he's someone that could certainly stand up to the challenge.
You mentioned he had a lot of tackles. As we know, linebacker tackles are not all created equals. You know, were most of his tackles within the box, you know, within that 5 to 5 yard range, or did a fair amount come down the field?
He was just all over the field, quite honestly. But a lot of them coming in 5 yard tackle box, coming in, making the plays. So he can be all over the field. If you hear Bruin making a play, Darius, yes, Darius. And I know all the hype went to Latu, but this is somebody who can easily be a great player for the Giants beyond just special teamers who can develop into a big time role.
Now he started off at Hawaii. I think as a matter of fact, I think he's a Hawaiian native, if I'm not mistaken, and he transferred to UCLA. Did he ever say why he made the transfer?
Well, there's a couple of times where during the Chip Kelly era at UCLA, a team came and played, and then the transfer portal era boomed. And next thing you know, Chip Kelly found the best player in the field, and he brought him to UCLA. Muasau was one of those guys initially that made that transition to UCLA. They got waxed by the Bruins in early 21. Next thing you know, he's someone starting on a UCLA defense that was vastly improved in 22. I'm sure Muasau had a big part of that. And then when the Bruins had a great defense in 23, he was in the middle of that as well.
Were you surprised as where he went in the draft?
I was surprised at the lack of UCLA love in the draft, but from Muasau, 6th round pick, I thought at least 4th, 5th rounder if you really thought about it. But all the love recently for UCLA was on the D line. So I could see Muasau maybe a little undersized, maybe most importantly getting overlooked as to pigeonholed, as we've talked about special teams play. 6th round, good that he wasn't undrafted, but I thought maybe a round or two higher could have been his ceiling this year.
You mentioned he's a little on the undersized range there. What has he done? What have the coaches done with him to kind of compensate for that?
Most importantly, he's just on the field. You trying to get guys, you have multiple linebackers. This is somebody who has played in every game over 5 years. I'm not sure what the coaches have to do with that, but he's just always out there, and availability sometimes is the best ability for somebody, especially in the linebacking core. He's always out there from 3 years in Hawaii. That's a lot of travel from coming to UCLA. And he had to go with different defensive schematics. In his first year at UCLA, their defensive coordinator, who has since passed, Bill McGovern, he wasn't on the field. And then switching to Danton Lynn. So he had to go through many different defensive schematics from 2 schools to just 1 school. So he had to flip and learn a bunch of different formations. And with all that, he still thrived in an ever-growing UCLA defense. So if you look at his numbers, a better defense, he played bigger and had a better role too.
In terms of the scheme, we're still trying to figure out here what the Giants, who have a new defensive coordinator, and Shane Bowen is going to ask his guys to play. But is there a specific scheme that you think Darius will really excel in?
I would say his versatility is one of his biggest weapons. The ability to adapt to what's in front of him, from changing schools, changing defensive coordinators. That's his biggest role. I'm not sure if anything really fits the bill. He just has to get ready to NFL speed, deal with NFL backs and NFL receivers if he has to cover somebody tight ends wise. He's just somebody who has to adapt to the speed of the NFL game. I'm not sure if the schematics are really going to be a big part of it.
How does he do with covering backs out of the backfield?
I would say maybe not the strongest. There's a couple of games UCLA last year got ripped apart by some backs. I remember watching the Oregon State game. That's when Damian Martinez was still a Beaver. They had a couple backs there. They got beat a couple of times, but when the D-line got pressure, made it a lot easier for Muasau to get some coverage.
Just going back to the coverage again, you mentioned before that he can be an every down linebacker. He can be in coverage. Can you just talk a little bit about his sideline to sideline range, and how is he on the back pedal?
I would say overall Muasau, when it comes to backpedaling, decent. Sideline to sideline, he's all over the field. And maybe one of the top 2 Bruins last year, other than Latu, when it came to just racing around the field and making plays. I would say number 2 on the most recent UCLA defense is to the best side-to-side defender.
Where can he get better in his game?
I was trying to study him, kind of building up to this. Maybe better when it comes to open field tackling. And this is somebody who makes a lot of tackles to begin with. But it's one thing to have a lot of guys, surrounding, wrapping up. Somebody who needs to get better overall at tackling and then better in coverage overall. You're going to be facing some elite agile backs. You're going to be facing some elite talent in the NFC East. So this is someone who, if he wants to be an every down guy versus just a special teamer, make those tackles and get much better in coverage.
All right, now coming up, Giant fans, we're going to talk about the intangibles that Darius Muasau brings to the game, so don't go anywhere. Hey, Giant fans, it's winner takes all time in the NBA and NHL. And FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. If you're like me and you're liking the New York Knicks' odds or the New York Rangers' odds as they pursue championship or immortality in their respective sports, then you will want to be part of the action. Right now, when you sign up for an account with FanDuel, you will get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and we are talking Darius Muasau with the host of the Locked On UCLA podcast, and he is Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer, and he does a great job, as do all of our college hosts. So please make sure you check out their work. They're covering more than just football. They cover baseball, the commitment period, the signing period, or I think that's what's called the signing period, right? So all that stuff is covered. And also, speaking of podcasts, here on the Locked On Giants podcast this week, we have rookie minicamp coming up on Friday and Saturday. I'll have shows for you then. Again, thank you for spending part of your day with us here at Locked On Giants. And Zach, let's talk about the intangibles that Darius Muasau brings to the table. And let's start off with, what kind of a guy is he? What kind of a teammate?
This is a guy who is a great leader, somebody who can be there. And, this was a defense that was truly transformed. A part of the Muasaus, there's the Murphy twins, couple of UCLA players who just were undrafted free agents, and obviously Latu. This is a team that, with Muasau in the middle there as a linebacker, transformed a pretty terrible defense. And Chip Kelly was not known for having great defenses at UCLA. Muasau comes in through the portal. He is somebody that was a stalwart and kind of shored up the linebacking room. And now you had Ken Norton Jr. there coaching that linebacking room. So he got a lot of good teaching in his specific positional group when he was at UCLA just those 2 years. He was an all-Mountain West honoree, first team a couple of years at Hawaii for a team that competed for a Mountain West championship in his first year there, transitioning to a Bruin. This is somebody who knew how to be a leader at Hawaii, transfer, and still make a big-time impact wherever he was in the field as a Bruin.
Now, obviously, LA is a very big media market, so nothing new there. New York is probably bigger, a little bit bigger than UCLA and whatnot. And also, out in LA, you've got USC, you've got some other schools out there. How do you think he might make the adjustment coming to basically what is a fishbowl type of market? I mean, all eyes are going to be on the draft picks, no matter what, if they're first or sixth round. There's going to be a lot of expectations, especially for a team that was 6-11 last year. So this was a draft that obviously Joe Shayton had to hit out of the park. So how do you think Darius will handle that transition?
I think he'll handle it just fine. There's no real way to compare UCLA and USC. Obviously, there's a lot more coverage and fanfare for the team across town, especially in football. But for Darius, he still had to deal with the LA market, regardless of what his coach would do or lack thereof in love for the media. He still showed up, answered questions, win or loss, and he's going to be playing with a chip on his shoulder. We're sitting here talking, all right, at the moment, projected as a special teamer. That's somebody who wants to come in and make a big-time impact, and maybe that won't happen in his rookie year. But when you go from LA to New York, I know the media market's similar, but still vastly different in their own ways. He's somebody who can, I think, easily handle the moment when it comes to the media, growing and embracing what it means to be a Giant.
What about in terms of the locker room? Sometimes you get, these players who were big fishes, if you will, with their college team, and now they come to a new team. How do you think, based on what you know about him, how do you see him adjusting to the locker room, where I wouldn't say they have huge personalities, but they do have a few guys there that are, especially on the defensive side of the ball, who are pretty well known?
I think Muasau would be just fine when it comes to transitioning. I'm not sure he really pushed anybody's buttons when he was at UCLA. This is obviously someone who played multiple schools, thrived in multiple schemes. This is somebody who didn't really push any buttons. He wasn't the loudmouth. UCLA wasn't a loudmouth program. The one thing Chip Kelly really had when he was a UCLA coach, he didn't really have guys that got kicked off teams, guys that were loudmouths. big time. Now, there are a couple guys in the defense last year that made some dumb plays and cost UCLA some wins and losses because of their antics on the field. Muasau was not one of those guys.
In terms of his coachability, I mean, first off, how is he as far as coaching? And when you look at this next level, what is required to succeed? Does something in his technique have to change, or is it just a matter of getting used to the speed of the game?
I would think biggest thing is speed, getting used to the NFL offenses. And the big thing is, hey, he's moving up. He's trying to 6th-round pick. Yes, you're not guaranteed anything, 6th-round pick. And you're trying to prove to a team that, as you mentioned, that's trying to grow and improve upon their season last year. Big thing is, I'm not sure that for his technique, he's not going to sit there and be like, all right, I'm not going to change my technique. At this point, I truly believe he'll do anything it takes to be a big-time impact for this Giants team. And he's got to take that chip on his shoulder that he was one of 2 Bruins drafted. Latu is a superstar, and Muasau was just as big a part of that defense as Latu was. So I think he is willing and able to change. If coaching staff sees a need in his technique, do that. I think the biggest thing is just finding ways to get used to the speed, stronger, faster. And if he's only put into a certain role, excelling that as best to his ability.
What about him as a person? I mean, I'm talking personally, like interests and, what kind of a guy is he? What is he like? What's he into?
This is a guy who was, born in San Diego, then played in what was becoming his hometown of Hawaii. So he actually was born in SoCal, went to Hawaii. This is someone who's kind of easygoing, loves just to handle the sights and the sounds. He has 5 brothers. So, when it comes to probably a household that had to deal with the physicality of football, doing all that, this is someone who had to spread the love in the Muasau family. So easygoing, mature, and knows how to handle a locker room for sure.
Now, how old is he again? I don't recall. Was he 20?
I don't exactly know his age off the top of my head, but he's a 5th-year player, used that COVID year. So he played every game in his college career. Before, during, after COVID, played in every game. So he might be we'll see how his body takes 5 years of college football, translate that to the NFL, but I don't know exactly his age off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think I thought he was a little older than your average rookie, but a lot of guys are in that boat. But what I was going to ask you is do you think that having that extra year of eligibility helped his game? And if so, how do you see it as helping his game?
He came off of what was, I think, his best season. His best numbers statistically came at Hawaii for an individual season. He still thrived at UCLA. It was very important in 22, extremely important in 23, and played it at a Power 5 level before the Pac-12 disbanded. So I think it would have helped him. I am shocked it was a 6th-rounder. Would have thought maybe a 5th-rounder could have fit the bill. But in the end, you're drafted. You take that where you get it. So I think for him, I wonder, we talk durability, but that doesn't always translate college to NFL. Sometimes guys play, and regardless of the sport, they're healthy all their career, and then you go to the professional level. In this case, for him, it's the NFL. I think it helped his draft stock, showcasing yet another change when it came to a defensive coordinator. So that was at least 3-4 based on what was given game prep week per week that he had to deal with going from Hawaii to UCLA. I don't know, not exactly turmoil, but the changes that happened in the defensive coordinator room. So I would think it proved he can learn different things. He can adapt. And he was on the field for 5 separate seasons. That was hard to do during COVID. Hawaii has to fly, even though they don't always fly from Hawaii football games. You got to fly at least 4 hours just to get to the West Coast, or 5 hours, right? Let alone a big trip. Then to come to UCLA, change the scenery, and still prove he's available. I think that's important. Now, I wonder, is he going to get an injury early on in training camp after all those games, or is he just so strong and durable? I'd like to seek the former than the latter.
All right, Giant fans, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that. But there's just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. And the more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. unique stickers that you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton of people include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or robot pachinko machines. And there's always new timed events to help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it right now for free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Zach, the Giants have two starters at inside linebacker. They've got Bobby Okereke, who last year played every single snap, unheard of in today's NFL, but he managed it. Micah McFadden is his partner in crime, if you will. So that being said, I'm thinking for Darius, maybe a sub package type role, spot duty type thing. So what kind of sub packages do you think he might excel in? Are you, like nickel, what do you dime, what do you anticipate would be a good fit for him?
I think he would need a lot of coaching, although I think he has the size to play nickel. I think based on what his skill set is, maybe a dime package would be the best. But if the Giants are creative and Muasau is flexible enough in terms of his role, versatile enough, a nickel would be an interesting package for him to learn and be as a spot role. I think better as a dime, but he's competing with some big time players that play every down. I'm not sure he's going to challenge that starting role immediately, but if you need a plug and play, if someone's banged up late in this season, I think this is a perfect guy who could fill in and still do a nice job, but he's got to prove he's quick enough to play nickel. I think a dime would be better for him in a spot role.
Do you think it would be disappointing if he landed on the practice squad, given where he's at in his development?
I would think based on what the Giants already have, how late he was drafted, and what the rest of the NFL viewed some of the other NFL, UCLA NFL signees, I think it's more of a sign that outside of Latu, the Bruins defense wasn't highly thought of from their D-line. It was maybe a one guy show. This is someone who could very well be on the practice squad, could very well challenge for a spot on the roster. And with him being a sixth rounder, I wouldn't be surprised that he might land on that practice squad. Of course, it's disappointing for any player to see that, hear that, and maybe do that. But I won't say if he doesn't cut in training camp and doesn't make the right plays, make special teams plays, it would be a disappointment. But I think how late he went in the draft, I wouldn't be surprised if that actually happens.
You've been telling us a lot about Darius. What's something, though, that we don't know? Maybe it's well known in the UCLA community, something you might know personally, but what's something that, Giant fans should know about him that maybe isn't as well known?
Well, the big thing is, I'm not sure if it's the quiet stat, but here's something that we should take into consideration. He played in every game. That means he played in the bowl games. Every single player nowadays generally likes to opt out. And he played in that last game, was the defensive MVP for the bowl, for a team that was crumbling, for a coaching staff that was on the outs. This is somebody who stuck with it, with everybody grumbling, including myself, that the coach needed to get fired. They were embarrassed on the field, not because of the defense, but because they didn't know what they were doing offensively. So he came out and not only stuck through it, didn't want to opt out and go prepare for the draft. He played his last game and was the defensive MVP in a game the Bruins were trailing, and found a way to be the best player in their biggest bowl win in quite a few years, because they hadn't won a bowl in quite some time. So it's maybe not the hidden little story you're looking for. But that was something I thought was interesting, that most players opt out. Usually they're top draft picks. And I know Muasau wasn't necessarily that. But I thought that was impressive that through all the games, he played 15 in the season for Hawaii. So think about that. That's close to an NFL season. He's proven that. And then to go play in the bowl game for a team that was really figuring out what was going on. Guys in the portal, injured. It was a weird team for that bowl season in late 23, and he still showed out and was the best he possibly could be in that game. I think that's a real strong indication of the type of player the Giants are getting, that he comes out prepared and did his best in a game when he could have, all the scouts are watching the bowl games.
Yeah, and that he didn't make a quote unquote business decision like so many players do, because they figure, why risk getting injured in a bowl game, especially since I'm not going to be around next year, so why, hurt my draft stock. So that
Yeah,
speaks
absolutely.
volumes about the type of player he is. Zach, appreciate all the intel on Darius Muasau. Looks like this Giants draft class as a whole is very promising, so I can't wait to see them. They will be on the field this coming week, starting on Friday. So Friday, Saturday is the rookie mini camp, and we in the New York media will have access to it. Giant fans, that's going to do it for this edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. I want to thank Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer for coming on with me. He is, again, the host of the Locked On Bruins podcast, so you can find him and his work on YouTube. You can find it on any of the audio podcasts channels that, whether it be Google Play, Apple, whatever, wherever you get your podcast, you can find his work. Thank you so much for tuning in and spending part of your day with us. And we will see you again tomorrow, Giant fans.